Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, but not just generally.
No, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of cybersecurity for entrepreneurs and freelancers.
Exactly. And to do that, we've got some really cool sources lined up. We've got a cybersecurity course outline specifically designed for small business owners and folks who work for themselves.
And we've got some real-world case studies, stories about businesses that got hacked to really drive those points home.
Which are always fascinating, but sometimes a little scary. But don't worry, we'll also have advice from experts in the field, and the goal is to leave you with some actionable steps.
Exactly. We don't want you leaving this deep dive overwhelmed. We want you to walk away thinking, okay, I can do this. I can protect my business.
That's exactly it. We're aiming for aha moments, not anxiety. So, are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start by getting practical with some quick hit tips from this cybersecurity course. And I gotta say, some of these surprised me.
Yeah, some of these might seem small, but they can have huge consequences.
Okay, so first up, the course says we should set our email to not automatically download images. Why is that so important?
Well, you know how sometimes you open an email and you can tell the sender knows you opened it?
Oh, yeah. Is that what's happening?
It can be. They can actually track if you've opened the email through a hidden image, and that image can be used to download malware onto your device.
Really? Wow. Okay, so I'm definitely turning off automatic downloads. I'd rather have that extra security.
Definitely a good move. Okay, next up, public USB ports and charging stations. They're tempting, especially when your phone's about to die.
Right. But you're going to tell me we shouldn't use them?
It's risky. I mean, think about it. You're plugging your device into something that who knows how many other people have used.
Okay, that's a good point. I guess free juice isn't worth the risk.
Right. It's called juice jacking. Someone can potentially swipe your data or install malware while you're charging.
Juice jacking. Wow, I always thought that was an urban legend. Okay, so public USB ports and charging stations off the list. What about using different email addresses for different purposes?
That's a good one. It's like if one account gets hacked, everything connected to it is vulnerable. So it's best to compartmentalize things,
Right. Separate your work email from your personal email and your online shopping email. That way, if one gets compromised, it doesn't take down the whole house of cards.
Exactly. And don't forget about those log in with Facebook or log in with Google buttons. It's super convenient. But if that account gets hacked, everything is vulnerable.
Okay, yeah, I do that all the time. So that's going on my list of things to change. I think I'm seeing a theme here. Little habits, big impact.
Exactly. And speaking of big impact, our cybersecurity course lists the top 10 cybersecurity mistakes businesses make. And let's be honest, we've probably all made a few of these.
Oh, I'm sure I have. Hit me with those cybersecurity blunders.
All right, well, number one, drum roll, please. Failing to update software.
Oh, man, that's me. I'm so guilty of this.
We all are. But seriously, those updates aren't just about getting the latest bells and whistles. They're patching vulnerabilities before hackers can exploit them.
Okay, so procrastination on updates is basically an invitation for trouble.
Pretty much. And speaking of invitations, how long do you think it takes a hacker to crack a 6-character password?
6 characters. Well, I'd like to think it would take quite a while. A few hours, maybe even a day. I don't know.
It can take seconds, instantly even. There are readily available tools to crack simple passwords like that.
Okay, so that's a big yikes for me. I guess it's time to up my password game, which ties into the second big cybersecurity mistake: weak passwords.
You got it. A lot of people think they're safe with a simple password, but the truth is those are the easiest ones to crack.
Okay, good to know. What else is on that list of mistakes?
Well, this one might surprise you, but this source says that even solopreneurs, even folks who work completely on their own, need to think about cybersecurity training.
Really? What would that even look like for a one-person business?
It's about recognizing things like phishing attempts or knowing how to respond if, worst case scenario, something goes wrong.
Right. It's like having an escape plan in case of a digital fire.
Exactly. And speaking of worst case scenarios, another mistake businesses make is not backing up data regularly.
Oh, right. I've heard that one before. Data is the lifeblood of any business, so if something happens and you don't have a backup, well, that's a disaster.
Absolutely. And the last mistake we'll talk about right now is insecure remote access, especially relevant for entrepreneurs and freelancers who are working from, anywhere.
Right. Coffee shops, co-working spaces, home offices.
Exactly. You got to make sure those connections are secure.
Okay, so for each of these mistakes, we've got the why it's a problem, and the what's the risk. But what about the how? What can our listener actually do to protect themselves?
Right. Okay, so first up, make those software updates automatic whenever possible. It's just the easiest way to stay protected.
And for those pesky passwords, our source recommends a password manager. It's like having a digital vault for all your passwords.
Yeah. And a good password manager will not only store your passwords, but it'll also help you create strong, unique passwords that would take hackers ages to crack.
Love it. So what about like me? I'm a solopreneur, no dedicated IT team here. Where do I even begin with cybersecurity training?
Well, luckily, there are tons of free online resources for basic training.
Really? Like what?
Webinars, short courses, even just reading security blogs can help you stay informed.
Okay, so stay informed. And it sounds like this all boils down to something called cyber hygiene.
Cyber hygiene. Yeah, I like that.
It's like brushing your teeth for your digital life,
Yeah.
right? Just those small, consistent actions for big long-term protection.
I like that analogy. And it's so true. Because in cybersecurity, inconsistency is what gets you hacked. It's that one time you click on a suspicious link or reuse a password that can open you up to attack.
Okay, so it's about building those good digital habits, those routines that keep us safe.
Exactly. So let's talk about some specific best practices that we haven't already covered. We've already talked about strong passwords. A good one is like securing a vault with multiple locks, not just one flimsy lock.
Right, gotta have those multiple locks.
And then there's two-factor authentication, which adds an extra layer of verification to your accounts.
So even if someone gets my password, they still can't get in.
Exactly. And it's surprisingly easy to set up, Most major platforms offer it.
Okay, two-factor authentication. And of course, we can't forget about updating software.
Seriously, those updates are crucial. They patch those security holes before hackers can exploit them.
Got it. Update, update, update. What about social media? We haven't really touched on that yet.
Be cautious with what you share. It's about minimizing your digital footprint and not giving away information that hackers could use.
Right, like maybe don't post those vacation photos while you're on vacation.
Exactly. And finally, recognizing and avoiding phishing scams, those can be super sophisticated.
Yeah, like how do you even spot a phishing email these days? They're getting so good.
Hover over links to see the actual URL before clicking.
Oh, right. Good tip.
And look out for typos or grammatical errors and anything that creates a sense of urgency, like you must act now. Slow down, think critically, and don't click on anything you're not sure about.
Okay, great advice. If our listeners take away just one thing from this cyber hygiene discussion, what should it be?
Pick one new habit from this list and implement it today. Even that one small change can make a big difference.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. Okay, so now that we've covered the basics, let's talk about those weakest links in cybersecurity.
This is where it gets real, huh?
Yeah. And, it's not always about fancy hacking techniques. Sometimes the weakest link is us.
Human error, come on, that's got to be avoidable, right?
You'd think so. But it happens all the time. Clicking phishing links, using weak passwords, not following security protocols.
Oh, yeah. Guilty as charged. We've all been there. It's easy to get complacent.
Exactly, and hackers know that. Our source even talks about a phishing attack that was disguised as a company-wide survey.
So smart people can get fooled too, huh?
It happens to the best of us.
So how do we combat human error? What can we do to protect ourselves from ourselves?
Well, security training and awareness are crucial. It's like building a culture of cybersecurity, making sure everyone understands the risks and how to protect themselves.
Right. So it's not just about having the right tools. It's about having the right mindset.
Exactly. Our source also recommends multi-layered security measures. Things like email filtering, which can block phishing attempts before they even reach your inbox, or AI-driven anomaly detection tools.
Those sound pretty high-tech.
They can be, but, it's like having a digital bodyguard for your data. They're constantly monitoring for suspicious activity and flagging anything that looks out of place.
So if someone's trying to, break into my system.
Those tools will sound the alarm.
Got it. But, sometimes those security breaches happen because of honest mistakes, like accidentally clicking on a link or downloading a file.
Absolutely. We all make mistakes. And that's why the source recommends having anonymous reporting mechanisms.
So you can report a potential security issue without worrying about getting in trouble.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's talk specifically about our listeners, digital marketers, entrepreneurs, freelancers.
Right, because we're often more vulnerable to cyber attacks since we're handling sensitive customer data and, we rely heavily on online tools.
Right, exactly. And we might not have those dedicated IT security teams to back us up.
That's true. So let's talk about the specific risks. First up is website security. You got to make sure you're using secure hosting, that your site has HTTPS, and that you're regularly updating everything.
It's like locking the front door to your online shop.
Exactly. Then there's online transaction security, making sure that if you're processing payments, you're doing it through a secure gateway and protecting customer data.
We've all heard those horror stories about companies with massive data breaches. We definitely don't want to be one of them.
Right. And last but not least, there's business information confidentiality.
Yeah.
How are you storing and handling data? Are you using encryption? Do you have access controls in place?
Okay, so it's about treating your data like the valuable asset it is. Now, to really drive these points home, let's move on to some real-world stories.
Everyone loves a good cautionary tale, right?
Right. Okay, so our source has a bunch of these, but let's start with the Stuxnet worm. Have you heard of this one?
Yeah, that was a wild one.
So it was this sophisticated cyber attack that targeted Iran's nuclear program. But here's the crazy part. Parts of Stuxnet's code are still being used in malware today. It's a reminder of how impactful these attacks can be and how long they can stick around.
Absolutely. And, it's not just nation states that are targets. Let's talk about the Colonial Pipeline attack, which happened right here in the U.S.
Okay, so Colonial Pipeline, that was a ransomware attack that shut down a major fuel pipeline, causing huge gas shortages, if I remember correctly.
Exactly. And they got in using one employee's leaked password.
Wait, seriously, one password?
Just one. It's a reminder that a single vulnerability can have massive consequences.
Okay, I'm officially paranoid about passwords now.
You should be. And let's not forget about the Equifax breach, a massive data breach that exposed the personal information of over 140 million people.
And the cost of this breach? Astronomical, not just financially, but also in terms of reputation.
Yeah, it just goes to show that no business is immune to cyber attacks.
Okay, those case studies are pretty intense. Let's lighten things up a bit and talk about something that might surprise you. The cybersecurity risks of job hunting.
People don't often think about that, but it's a real concern.
Yeah, both seeking and offering employment can expose you to unexpected cyber threats.
Exactly. Like, how sometimes people use those deep fakes, those realistic AI-generated videos.
Oh, yeah, those are wild. I've seen those videos where they make it look like someone is saying or doing something they never actually did.
Well, people are using them to impersonate recruiters or potential employees.
Wait, are you serious? So you might think you're interviewing with a real person, but it's actually an AI trying to trick you.
Exactly. Our source even tells a story about a CEO who was scammed out of $220,000 by a deepfake impersonating a business partner.
Wow, that's scary. What else should we watch out for when we're job hunting?
Well, be careful about oversharing personal information on your CV or in online job applications. You want to showcase your skills and experience, but you also need to protect your personal information.
Right, it's a balance. So verify everything.
Exactly. Check the company website, look up the recruiter on LinkedIn, and if something seems off, don't be afraid to contact the company directly.
Right, trust your gut. And be careful about those malicious links.
Oh, absolutely. Those fake job postings or those emails with links to application forms that actually download malware, always double check that URL.
If something seems too good to be true.
It probably is.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to a threat that's becoming increasingly common, ransomware attacks.
It's basically a digital hostage situation, They encrypt your data and then hold it hostage until you pay a ransom.
And remember that stat from earlier, a cyber attack happens every minute. So this is a very real and present danger for everyone.
It is. A typical scenario starts with a malicious email or even just visiting a website that exploits vulnerabilities in your browser.
So even just browsing the web can be risky.
It can be. So how do we protect ourselves from these digital kidnappers?
Okay, so strong passwords, two-factor authentication, regular software updates. Those are the basics, right?
Exactly. And, be super vigilant about email security. Don't click on suspicious links. Think twice before opening attachments and trust your instincts.
Okay, got it. And data backups are essential.
Absolutely. You should have multiple backups and make sure at least one is offline, like on an external hard drive or in a secure cloud storage service.
So even if your data gets encrypted, you can restore it without paying the ransom.
Exactly. It's like having an insurance policy for your digital life.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here in just this first part of our deep dive. And I've got to say, I've learned a lot.
Me too.
From those quick-hit cybersecurity tips to those scary real-world case studies, we've talked about cyber hygiene, the weakest links, and the specific challenges faced by entrepreneurs and freelancers.
And we've even explored those cybersecurity risks involved in job hunting. It's been quite a journey so far, but we've still got a lot more to cover, right?
We do. In our next segment, we're going to dive even deeper into the technical side of things. We'll be exploring the tools and resources that can help you level up your digital defenses.
That's right. We're going to talk about firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and all those other fancy cybersecurity tools that sound intimidating but can actually be pretty easy to use once you know how they work.
Okay, I am ready to geek out. Bring on the cybersecurity toolkit.
All right, let's get technical. We're going to break down some key concepts, but don't worry, we'll keep it practical.
Okay, good. Because I'm no tech whiz, but I'm eager to learn.
Perfect. So let's start with networking.
Networking. You mean like attending industry events and making connections?
Not that kind of networking. Think about networking as the way devices, like computers and phones, talk to each other and to the internet.
Okay. And why is networking important for cybersecurity?
Because a well-configured network can be your first line of defense. It's like the foundation of a secure digital building.
Got it, the foundation. So where do we even begin with understanding networking?
Well, we need to talk about IP addresses.
IP addresses. Those are like unique identifiers for every device on a network, right? Like a digital street address for your computer or your phone.
Exactly. And then there are protocols.
Protocols. Now, those sound a little more complicated.
They're not so bad. Think of protocols like traffic laws for the internet, the rules that govern how data is transmitted and received.
Okay, I like that analogy. So what are some of the key protocols that we should be familiar with?
Well, there's TCP/IP, which is basically the foundation of all internet communication.
Okay, TCP/IP. Got it.
And then there's HTTP and HTTPS, which you've probably seen in those website addresses. Those are used for web browsing, and HTTPS is the secure version.
So always look for the S. Got it.
Exactly. And then there's DNS, which basically translates those domain names that we all know and love, like google.com, into those IP addresses that we were talking about earlier.
Ah, so DNS is like a phone book for the internet, connecting names to numbers.
Exactly. Now that we've got those basics down, let's move on to system administration.
System administration. That sounds pretty technical.
It can be. It's all about keeping your computer systems secure and running smoothly.
So it's like being the IT manager for your business, even if you're, a one-person show.
Exactly. And it involves managing user accounts, implementing security measures, backing up data, all that fun stuff.
Right. Keeping everything up to date, running smoothly. What about cloud computing? That seems to be a big part of how businesses operate these days.
It is, and it comes with its own set of security considerations.
Okay, so first of all, for those of us who aren't tech savvy, can you explain what cloud computing is?
Sure. Think of cloud computing as renting office space instead of owning it.
Renting.
Yeah, so instead of having all of your servers and hardware and software physically in your office.
It's out there somewhere in the cloud.
Exactly. You're accessing all those computing resources over the internet. And it's super convenient, it's cost-effective and scalable. But we need to talk about security in the cloud.
Right. Because is it risky to have your data stored, out there somewhere?
Well, there are risks, but also a lot of benefits. Major cloud providers like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they've got some serious security in place, often more than a small business could afford to manage on their own.
So it's like having a team of security experts guarding your data 24/7.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you still have to do your part. Strong passwords, two-factor authentication, and understanding the shared responsibility model are still key.
Shared responsibility model. What's that?
It means that you and the cloud provider both have responsibilities for security.
Okay, so how does that work?
So they secure the infrastructure, the physical servers, the data centers, the network, all of that.
Got it.
But you're responsible for securing your data and applications, managing your users, making sure your passwords are strong.
Okay, so it's a team effort. They're responsible for the cloud, and I'm responsible for what I put in the cloud.
Exactly. Now let's get back to those protocols for a second. We already covered some of the important ones. TCP/IP, HTTP.
Right, the essential building blocks of internet communication.
Exactly. But there are a few others that I want to make sure we cover. First up, SSLTLS.
SSLTLS. Okay, I've definitely seen that before.
Yeah, it's used to secure communication over a network, like when you buy something online.
Oh, so SSLTLS is like putting my credit card information in a sealed envelope before sending it through the internet.
Exactly. Then there's SSH, which allows for secure access to remote computers.
Remote computers. Now that sounds pretty advanced.
It can be, but it's commonly used by system administrators to manage servers. But even if you're not managing servers yourself, it's good to know about these things so you can, make informed decisions about your online activities.
Okay, so knowing about these different protocols helps us to be more savvy internet users.
Exactly. Now let's dive into some practical tools and techniques.
Okay, I'm ready to get hands-on.
Great. So our cybersecurity course outline covers a bunch of different topics here.
Like what?
It talks about vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, incident response, security architecture, monitoring, and analysis.
Woo, that's a lot. Maybe we should break it down a bit. What's vulnerability assessment?
Okay, so think of vulnerability assessment like a checkup for your digital health.
A checkup.
Yeah. You use automated tools to scan your computer systems and your network, basically looking for any known vulnerability.
Vulnerabilities. Those are like weak spots that hackers could exploit.
Exactly. You find them and you fix them before the bad guys can get in.
Okay, so vulnerability assessment, finding and fixing the weak spots makes sense. And what about penetration testing? I feel like I've heard that term before.
Yeah, penetration testing or pen testing takes things a step further and simulates a real-world attack to see if those vulnerabilities can actually be exploited.
So it's like hiring an ethical hacker to try to break into your system to see if they can find a way in.
You got it. And speaking of, worst-case scenarios, we also need to talk about incident response.
Oh, yeah, that's the what if we actually get hacked plan, right?
Exactly. What happens when, despite all your best efforts, a security breach occurs? Do you have a plan?
Got it. Okay, so vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, incident response. What was next on that list?
Security architecture.
Okay, that sounds pretty high level.
It can be. It's about how you design and implement secure network and system structures from the ground up.
Got it. Okay. Can you give me an example?
Sure. So one basic principle of security architecture is the principle of least privilege. Basically, it's all about limiting access to sensitive information.
Oh, like a need-to-know basis for data.
Exactly. And then there's something called network segmentation.
Network segmentation. That sounds interesting.
It's a fancy way of saying you divide your network into smaller segments to limit the impact of a potential breach.
Ah, so if one part of the network gets compromised, it doesn't bring down the whole thing.
Exactly. Think of it like having firewalls between different departments in a building.
Okay, so all these different pieces are starting to fit together now.
That's what security architecture is all about. Okay, next up on that list is monitoring and analysis.
That sounds like a 247 job.
It can be. It's all about watching for any suspicious activity on your network,
So it's like having security cameras for your digital infrastructure.
Exactly. And there are specific tools that are used for this, like intrusion detection systems or IDSs.
Intrusion detection systems? That sounds pretty intense.
They are, but they're basically looking for patterns that could indicate an attack.
Ah, okay. So you monitor for suspicious activity, and then you analyze those patterns to see if there's a real threat.
Exactly. And speaking of being proactive, we need to talk about security policies and procedures.
Ah, yes. Those are the rules of the road for cybersecurity, right?
Exactly. Even if you're a one-person show, you need clear guidelines in place for how to handle sensitive data, what's acceptable use of company systems, what to do if a security incident does happen.
Right, right. So just having those rules written down, even if it's just for yourself, can help you stay on track and stay safe.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's security awareness training.
We've talked about that a little bit already, right?
We have, but it's so important. People are often the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain.
Because we make mistakes, we click on things we shouldn't, we fall for those social engineering tricks.
Exactly. So training is really about, educating yourself and your team, if you have one, about the risks and the threats and the best practices.
Got it. Okay, and the last thing on that list was research. And I have to say, researching cybersecurity sometimes feels like going down a rabbit hole.
It can. But it's so important because the threat landscape is constantly evolving. The bad guys are always coming up with new tricks.
It's like doing homework on the bad guys.
In a way. Following security blogs, listening to podcasts, attending industry events.
So much information to keep up with. Any recommendations on where to start?
Sure. So for news and in-depth analysis, I recommend Krebs on security, dark reading, and the Hacker News.
Oh, Krebs on security. I've heard of that one.
It's great. And if you want to get a little more technical, you can check out SANS Institute's blogs and white papers.
Okay, noted. And what about something a little more casual, for someone who's just getting started with this stuff?
I love the podcasts Risky Business and Paul's Security Weekly. They do a great job of breaking down complex topics in a fun, engaging way.
Okay, so we've got news, technical deep dives, and casual conversations. That's a good mix. What about connecting with other people in the cybersecurity world?
Oh, that's huge. Don't underestimate the power of professional networking.
Right, because cybersecurity is a community.
Exactly. So go to online forums, meetups, conferences.
Meet other people, share knowledge, learn from the best.
Exactly. And you never know who you'll meet. It could lead to mentorships, job opportunities.
Or just some really interesting conversations.
Right. Okay, before we move on, let's take a quick detour into the world of digital forensics.
Ooh, digital forensics. Sounds like something out of a CSI episode.
It kind of is. It's all about investigating and analyzing digital evidence to figure out what happened during a security incident.
So it's like playing detective in the digital world, piecing together those clues to solve a cybercrime.
Exactly. They use special tools and techniques to examine computers, networks, devices.
That's so cool. I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a really interesting field. And it's growing, too, with high demand for skilled professionals.
Speaking of skills, what are some of the must-have skills for anyone who wants to get into cybersecurity?
Well, we've already talked about networking, understanding how networks work, those IP addresses, those protocols. That's definitely a foundation.
The basics.
And then there's system administration, being able to manage those systems, keep everything running smoothly and securely.
Okay, but what about some of the more specialized skills?
Well, knowing how to program is a huge advantage, especially if you're interested in things like penetration testing or malware analysis.
So you need to know how to code.
Not necessarily, but it definitely helps to have a good understanding of how software works, how it can be exploited, how to write secure code.
Okay, so programming is a plus. What else?
Strong analytical and problem-solving skills are crucial because cybersecurity is all about identifying, analyzing, and solving problems, often under pressure.
Right, it's like you're a digital detective trying to figure out what happened and how to fix it.
Exactly. And, sometimes you have to explain those technical things to people who don't speak tech, so good communication skills are also important.
So you got to be able to speak geek and human, right?
Exactly. And let's not forget attention to detail, because cybersecurity is a field where precision and accuracy are really important.
Okay, got it. So those are some of the skills. What if someone's interested in a career in cybersecurity? Where do they even start?
Well, there are a lot of different paths you can take. There are online courses, certifications, boot camps, even college degree programs.
So something for everyone. And what about hands-on experience?
Yeah, that's crucial too. Our source recommends setting up what's called a virtual lab on your computer, just a safe space where you can practice your skills.
Oh, like a digital sandbox.
Exactly. And there are tons of open source tools and resources that can help you build that virtual lab.
Okay, so online courses, certifications, hands-on experience. And of course, we can't forget about staying informed.
Right. And that brings us back to those resources we talked about earlier.
Krebs on security, dark reading, SANS Institute.
Exactly. Those are all great places to start. And don't underestimate the value of connecting with other people in the field,
Attending those conferences, joining those online forums.
Exactly. It's all about community. Okay, now I want to shift gears a bit and talk about something that often gets overlooked in cybersecurity. The human element.
The human element. We talked about human error earlier, those mistakes we all make, but this is something different.
It is. It's not just about those technical measures, those firewalls and intrusion detection systems. It's about understanding the psychological tactics that attackers use to, get what they want.
You're talking about social engineering.
Exactly.
Those tricks that hackers use to manipulate people into giving up sensitive information.
Exactly. They prey on our emotions, our fear, our urgency, even our desire to be helpful.
So it's like they're hacking the human, not the computer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So can you give us some examples of those social engineering tactics?
Sure. So one classic example is phishing.
Oh, yeah, those emails that try to trick you into clicking on a malicious link or giving up your password.
Exactly. But social engineering can also happen over the phone, through text messages, even in person.
Right. We got to be vigilant on all fronts.
Absolutely. And our source highlights a tactic called pretexting, where the attacker creates a believable scenario to gain your trust.
So like they might pretend to be from your bank
Yeah,
or from tech support.
exactly. Or maybe a coworker or even a friend. They build rapport and then they exploit that trust.
That's scary. What other tactics should we watch out for?
Well, there's baiting.
Baiting, that sounds kind of fun.
Well, it's not fun when it happens to you. Basically, they're offering something enticing to lure you into a trap. Like a free download, a gift card, something like that.
Oh, so it's like digital clickbait,
Yeah.
but with potentially serious consequences.
Exactly. And then there's quid pro quo.
Quid pro quo, what does that even mean?
It means something for something.
Okay.
So the attacker might offer to help you with a technical problem in exchange for access to your computer.
Wow, that is sneaky.
It is. So how do we protect ourselves from all these tricks?
I feel like this is going to be a familiar refrain.
Awareness is key.
Awareness is key. Be skeptical, especially when you're dealing with unsolicited communication or requests for sensitive information.
Don't click on links from unknown senders. Never give out your passwords over email or phone.
Right. If you get an email from your bank asking you to update your password, don't click on that link.
Go directly to the bank's website or call them.
Exactly.
And if something sounds too good to be true,
It probably is.
exactly, don't fall for those get-rich-quick schemes or those free iPad offers.
Okay, so awareness is key. What else can we do?
Strong security measures. Two-factor authentication, keeping your software up to date.
Right. And using a good, reputable antivirus program.
It's like having a security system for your digital life.
Exactly. And our source also recommends security awareness training.
Yes. Those training programs can really help you recognize those tactics and avoid falling victim.
Absolutely. Okay, now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the ethical side of cybersecurity. Because, it's a powerful tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for evil.
Right. So you're saying there are good guys and bad guys in the world of cybersecurity.
Exactly.
So what do the good guys do?
Well, our source highlights this idea of ethical hacking, or white hat hacking.
White hat hacking. So these are like the good guys, the cybersecurity superheroes, who are using their skills to find and fix vulnerabilities before the bad guys can exploit them.
You got it. And they're operating, within the law. They have
Yeah.
permission from the organizations they're testing.
Right, but then there are also black hat hackers, right? The bad guys who are using their skills for malicious purposes.
Unfortunately, yes. Those are the folks who are motivated by personal gain. They want to steal data, disrupt systems.
Cause harm.
Exactly. So it's like a digital Wild West out there.
With both heroes and villains.
Exactly. And, sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference, but it's important to understand that ethical hacking is a valuable, essential part of cybersecurity.
It helps to make the internet a safer place.
Exactly. Now, we also need to talk about the legal side of things. There are laws and regulations in place that govern the use of technology, how data is protected.
So there are rules of the road in the digital world, too.
Absolutely. Our source highlights some of those data protection laws, like GDPR in Europe and CCPA here in California.
Right, those are the ones that protect individuals' privacy and give them more control over their data. Right?
Exactly. And businesses really need to be aware of those laws and make sure they're compliant.
So it's not just about protecting your own data, it's also about protecting your customers' data.
Exactly. And then, there are laws that specifically address cybercrime.
Like making it illegal to hack into someone's computer, steal their data.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's a whole legal framework around cybersecurity that we need to be aware of.
There is. It's complex and constantly evolving, but understanding the basics can help you protect yourself, protect your business, and stay on the right side of the law.
Okay, I know we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
From those basic cyber hygiene practices to these pretty complex ethical and legal discussions.
We have. But let's bring it back to our listener. The entrepreneur, the freelancer. What are the key takeaways from all of this?
What can they actually do to protect themselves?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that cybersecurity isn't just an IT issue. It's a business issue.
It's about protecting your data, your customers, your reputation.
And ultimately, your bottom line.
Exactly. And, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Start with the basics. Strong passwords, two-factor authentication, keeping your software up to date.
Build those good habits.
Exactly. And stay informed. And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
There are so many resources available to help you learn and grow.
Exactly. It's all about taking those small steps one at a time, to make yourself and your business more secure.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. Okay, so now that we've got those general principles down, let's talk about something a bit more specific. Let's talk about the security risks associated with some of those online platforms and tools that we use every day.
You're talking about email, social media, online payments, all that good stuff.
Exactly. These are all super convenient, but they also come with unique security challenges.
So let's talk about those digital danger zones. Where do we need to be extra careful?
Well, let's start with email, since it's often the lifeblood of a business, but it's also a prime target for hackers.
Yeah, it's how we communicate. It's how we do business.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that it would be an entry point for attackers.
Exactly. So strong passwords, two-factor authentication, being wary of those suspicious links and attachments.
Right, the basics.
Exactly. But is there anything else we should be doing to specifically lock down our inboxes?
Well, one tip that our source mentions and that we talked about earlier is to disable automatic image downloads in your email client.
Oh, right, because those images can be used to track opens or even deliver malware.
Exactly. And it's such an easy thing to change, Just go into your settings and make it happen.
Easy win for security.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's talk about social media. I mean, love it or hate it, it's a powerful tool for connecting with customers, building a brand,
It's a must-have these days.
but it also comes with risks. Every time you post, you're adding another piece to that puzzle of your online identity. And,
Yeah.
hackers are always trying to put that puzzle together.
So we need to be mindful of what we're sharing online. Okay, so what are some of the specific risks associated with social media?
Well, even if you're careful about not sharing personal information, hackers can use the information you do share, even seemingly harmless stuff, to guess your passwords, answer security questions, or even impersonate you online.
It's like we're handing them a blueprint to our lives.
In a way, yeah. And then there are those social engineering scams.
Right, like phishing attempts disguised as friendly messages.
Exactly. You think you're clicking on a link from a friend, but...
But you end up downloading malware or giving away your login information.
Exactly. So does this mean we have to abandon social media altogether?
I don't think that's realistic for most businesses.
Definitely not. But just be smart about it. Be mindful of what you're sharing. Don't overshare personal information, and be wary of anything that seems fishy.
Okay, good advice. And what about those third-party apps that are always promising to boost our productivity or enhance our social media experience?
Ah, those are tricky.
Are they safe to use?
It depends. They often require access to your social media data, so you really need to be careful about the apps that you're using.
Okay, so how do you know if an app is safe or not?
Well, for starters, look at the developer. Is it a reputable company?
Okay, so do your research.
Exactly. And then look at the permissions.
Right, those things that pop up and say, this app wants to access your location or your contacts.
Exactly. Do you really need that app to have access to all of that? Probably not. So just be selective and review those permissions carefully.
Got it. So social media security, check. Now let's talk about money matters.
Ah, yes, the stuff that keeps our businesses running.
Exactly. Online payments, banking, all that good stuff. What do we need to know?
Well, online payments and financial transactions are prime targets for hackers because that's where the real treasure is, right?
Yep, our hard-earned money.
Exactly. And it seems like every time I turn around, there's a new data breach or security scare.
It can be a bit overwhelming.
It can, but there are definitely things we can do to minimize our risk. So, for example, when you're making online payments, always use those secure payment gateways.
Secure payment gateways, those are services like, PayPal, Stripe, things like that.
Exactly. They encrypt your financial information during those transactions, so it's much harder for hackers to steal your data.
Okay, so they're like a bodyguard for my credit card information.
Exactly. And always look for that padlock icon in your browser's address bar.
The padlock, I've heard that one before.
It means you've got a secure connection.
And make sure the website's URL starts with HTTPS, not just HTTP, right?
Yes, the S stands for secure.
Got it. Padlock, HTTPS, those are the signs of a safe transaction. Okay, what about online banking? Any specific tips there?
Same rules apply,
Nice.
strong passwords, two-factor authentication, and be wary of suspicious emails or text messages.
So if I get an email from my bank asking me to update my password, should I just ignore it?
Always the safest bet is to contact your bank directly, through their official website or their phone number. Don't click on any links in those emails, even if they look legitimate.
It's better to be safe than sorry. Okay, now let's talk about those devices we carry around with us everywhere. Our smartphones and tablets.
Oh, yes. Those are basically mini computers.
And they're just as susceptible to cyber attacks as our laptops and desktops, right?
Absolutely. So what's the mobile security playbook? What do we need to do to protect ourselves?
Well, same principles apply. Keep your software up to date. Be cautious about the apps that you're downloading.
Right.
And be mindful of those app permissions. It's crazy how many apps want access to our location, our contacts, our camera, our microphone.
It is a little scary. Do you really need that weather app to know who you're calling?
Probably not.
Exactly. So just take a moment to review those permissions and really think about what you're giving those apps access to.
Got it. Mobile security, all about being mindful. Okay, now I want to talk about securing our home offices.
That's a great point. The lines between work and personal life are getting blurrier, especially with so many people working from home.
Exactly. So how do we extend those cybersecurity best practices to our home networks and devices?
Well, first of all, make sure you're using a strong password for your Wi-Fi network
Okay, strong password. Got it.
and change that default password that came with your router.
Because those are super easy for hackers to guess.
Exactly. And speaking of your router, make sure you're keeping its firmware up to date.
Firmware.
Yeah, that's the software that runs your router. And just like any other software, it needs those updates to patch those security vulnerabilities.
Okay, so update the router.
And while you're at it, make sure you enable your router's firewall.
The firewall, that's like, the first line of defense.
Exactly. It blocks any unwanted traffic from getting into your network.
Got it. Firewall up and running. Okay, what about VPNs? Are those really necessary?
If you're working with sensitive data, or if you're working on public Wi-Fi a lot, at coffee shops or co-working spaces.
A VPN is a must-have.
Exactly. It basically encrypts your internet traffic, so even if someone's snooping on that public Wi-Fi, they can't see what you're doing.
So it's like a digital invisibility cloak for my data.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about email security, social media security, online payments, mobile devices, home offices.
And I think the overall theme here is that those cybersecurity best practices that we talked about in the beginning, they apply to all of these different areas of our lives.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of security that encompasses your whole digital life, not just your business.
Cybersecurity is a lifestyle. Okay, great. Now that we've got the present covered, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the future.
The future of cybersecurity. Always an interesting topic. Ready to gaze into the crystal ball. The future. Well, one thing's for sure. That threat landscape, it never stands still.
Always changing, always evolving.
Exactly. And cyber criminals, they're getting more sophisticated, always upping their game.
So it's like a constant cat and mouse game, the good guys versus the bad guys. Do we need to be constantly looking over our shoulders, waiting for the next attack?
I wouldn't say that. It's more about being proactive, And luckily, while the threats are increasing, so are the solutions.
Okay, that's good to hear.
The cybersecurity industry, it's constantly innovating.
So it's like an arms race, right? The good guys and the bad guys trying to outsmart each other.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to stay informed, stay ahead of the curve.
Okay, so what are some of those emerging trends? What's coming down the pipeline in the cybersecurity world?
Well, one of the biggest trends is the rise of artificial intelligence.
AI. Everyone's talking about AI these days.
And for good reason. AI and machine learning, they're being used to automate security tasks, detect threats, respond to incidents more quickly.
So it's like having a digital bodyguard working behind the scenes, keeping us safe.
Exactly. They can analyze massive amounts of data to identify patterns that humans might miss.
That's amazing. So AI and machine learning are definitely on our side in this fight.
Well, it's not quite that simple. Like any tool, AI and ML can be used for good or for bad.
Oh no, so you're saying the bad guys are using AI too.
I am. Which means the good guys need to be even smarter.
A digital arms race with AI at the helm, that is both exciting and a little terrifying.
I agree. Another trend that's really important is cloud security. As more businesses move their operations to the cloud, it's becoming an even bigger target.
So cloud security is going to be a major focus.
It has to be. We need to be thinking about protecting that data, managing access, responding to those cloud-specific incidents.
It's like a whole new world of cybersecurity, right?
It is, and it requires a whole new way of thinking about security. Okay, and one more trend I want to mention is the Internet of Things.
The Internet of Things, or IoT for short, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's all about connecting devices to the internet, everything from smart thermostats to refrigerators.
Even light bulbs these days. It's amazing, but is it safe?
That's the question, right? Because as we add more devices, we're creating a larger attack surface.
So my smart home could actually make me more vulnerable.
It's a possibility. These devices, they often lack the same security features as traditional computers, so we need to be really thoughtful about how we're using them.
Got it. So IoT security, definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. The future of cybersecurity, it's all about connectivity. We're securing not just our computers and phones, but our entire digital lives.
And that means a lot of responsibility, right?
It does. It's going to take all of us working together, individuals, businesses, governments, to create a safe and secure digital world.
Okay, so a mix of challenges and opportunities lie ahead. I gotta say, though, I'm actually feeling pretty optimistic.
Me too. The
Yeah.
cybersecurity community is full of brilliant people who are working hard to protect us. And with awareness, education, collaboration, I think we can stay ahead of those threats.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up this deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. Thanks for joining us.
It's been fun.
We've covered a lot of ground here today, and I hope our listeners are walking away feeling empowered.
Empowered and informed.
Exactly. Remember, cybersecurity, it's a journey, not a destination. So keep learning, stay vigilant, and don't be afraid to ask for help along the way.
Great advice.
And hey, if you're looking for a career that's both challenging and rewarding, cybersecurity might be the perfect fit. All right, thanks again for joining us. Stay safe out there in the digital world.